Hey, welcome to the Barbecue Toolbox. Hey, today's episode we're going to trim a brisket. I'm going to show you the 6 easy steps on how to get a brisket trimmed out, and we're going to go ahead and get this thing going right now. So the first thing we do is we're going to look at what the different muscles are in the brisket. There's really 2 muscles that we have in a brisket. The first muscle is what we call the flat. It's this long flat part right here, and you'll see it easily as one grain, the grain going one way, and then the second part of the muscle is the point, and that's up here on this end here. So these are the 2 muscles. We're going to try and trim a lot of this fat and stuff around and get down to what we need there to cook. So the next thing we got to understand is what type of fat do we have on this thing. Some of the fat on a brisket will render out and some of it won't. And so I'm going to explain here, there's 2 different types of fat you'll find on the brisket. A hard fat, like this right here, is very hard and firm. And on the opposite side of the flat, you'll find there's this really loose fat on the top of the flat. And this here you can trim down also. But that's not as critical to trim that off as that hard fat that's on there. That hard fat really won't render out when you're cooking. So step number 1, we're going to trim the hard fat off of this brisket. So first big piece of hard fat is this piece right here that separates between the point and the flat. So this right here, we're going to trim all this out and get that out of the way. And we want to trim this so that try and leave as much meat behind and just get the fat. You're never going to get it so where you get just fat. You're probably always going to get a little bit of meat that goes with it, but there's that chunk. And then see this, it still runs in there. If I want to really get down in there, I can. I think that right there is pretty good. So on the opposite side, there's another hard chunk of fat right here. And we're going to take this piece off. You just feel it. It's firm. It's not loose at all. Just take that right off of there. And with this hard fat like that, you can just keep cutting until you get down to the meat. Get a little deep there. Okay. So the next part we're going to start working on is the softer fat that's on the top of the brisket. So I'm going to start working on that next. So here I've got some of the soft fat on the top, and what I want to do is I want to cut it down so that I've got about 1/4 of an inch on the top. This you want to get rid of because when you go to slice do your slices of the flat, you don't want a big thick layer of fat on your slices. So if you get that down to about 1/4 of an inch, it'll be a lot better when you go to eat it. So you're going to work on getting a lot of this softer fat off the top of this thing. And then we're going to work on it, go on to the next step. So the next step is we're going to trim if we find any of these brown oxidized spots on the brisket, we're going to trim that meat off. See here, this brown edge right here, this just can all go right off. You're gonna lose some meat here, but that's okay. Make sure I got it all. This particular piece I've got a little bit up here. I'm just gonna go ahead and get that right off of there. I got a little bit over here. So the next thing I'm going to do is look for any of the loose pieces of meat that may be hanging off of this, and if there's any loose pieces, I want to get those off of there because they're going to overcook. And so by removing that little bit of meat, you'll basically keep it all into one nice compact piece of meat to cook with. So I'm going to go around this thing right now and look for the little pieces of meat that are kind of hanging off, and any of those I'm just going to trim off. So this over here that's just going to burn up. So we're just going to kind of make this a little more uniform here at the top. That way got a little nose on here. I'm going to take that off. And if you want, you could save some of these trimmings where you get a little bit of meat in there. You could always put that in the freezer and save it for later. So I see that I've got some fat here that's got to go off. That's going to come off right there. On the next step is to flip this over, and we're going to remove some of this silver skin on the flat part of the brisket, so, and any of the fat that's on here. So try and get in there and here. So you can, on this stuff, you could spend all day on here doing this, but just try to get most of this big pieces of fat and silver skin if you can. Then the sixth step of getting your brisket prepared is you want to make yourself a little cut to show you which way the grain's running. And so on the flat, you can see here, the grain all runs in this direction. And when I make my slices, I want to go against the grain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of these corners, and this corner right here, and I'm going to cut it on an angle, the same angle that I want to use when I'm cutting my slices. So that way I know after it's cooked, I might not be able to see the grain anymore once it gets a bark on it. So I want to make that cut now. That way that's going to be my guide later on when I go and make my slices. I'll go right across the grain here. And I might lose a little bit of meat here, but that's going to be okay. So there you go, that's 6 easy steps on how to trim a brisket. If you like this video, go ahead and click the like button. If you want to see other videos like this in the future, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and click the little bell notification. That'll let you know when I put out a new video. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.